Hi, I'm Gail Banack.
And I'm Ilana Santone. Welcome to the She Means Business podcast. Throughout our careers, we faced countless questions and sought advice from other women we respect and admire. And that's exactly what this show is about.
Each week, we aim to help you achieve your goals by sharing our experiences and talking with successful leaders, offering real stories, practical advice, and actionable takeaways for women who mean business. All right, let's do this. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the She Means Business podcast. Today's episode is a little different. A few weeks ago, we reached out to our listeners and asked for your most burning questions. What's on your mind? What are you struggling with? How can we help? And today, Ilana and I are going to answer your questions. Okay, so let's get started. Kind of rapid fire. First question came from one listener who said, I've been working at the same place for a while and I want to keep progressing. I'm getting passed on for promotions and I keep getting the feedback that I'm lacking executive presence. What do they really mean, and how do I get past this? Okay, so Ilana, why don't you start on this one? Executive presence.
That is the elusive executive presence that many or most of us have heard at some point in our career. Unless you're born oozing executive presence, it's something that I think many of us have to develop over time. And I think that the hard thing about executive presence is it's such a general term that it's hard to say, what does it actually mean? And so I can share a little bit about what I think it means or how I've tried to identify it, which is I think executive presence is really less about you and more about how you're perceived by others, how you show up. And so
100%.
Everything is kind of in you. It's just whether how you present it to others in a way that they can receive it and see you as credible. And, you know, as you get more senior, as, disciplined enough to kind of share the right things. And so what I would say is, for me, if I would boil down executive presence into three things, it's how do you show up confidently? How do you show up at your best in terms of, understanding what you want to share? And how do you react or adjust in the moment to address things being thrown at you such that you can remain credible even as you're kind of going through whatever it is you're doing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh my God. I love that. I love that. Because the way that I think of it is, and I've heard it in my past as well, this idea of, can I put you in front of the president or the CEO and will you be okay? And I think what you just said answers that beautifully, because it's this idea of, will I look good? So always remember that. Whoever is telling you that you don't have executive presence or that you should have or you need to have executive presence is really just worried about their own ass, because they're worried that if they put you in front of their boss or the most senior person, will they look good and will you reflect well on them? So will you be well presenting well, and make them look good? I think that's one element. And if you're confident, if you're articulate, and then I love your last point, can you think on your feet? Because that's the scariest part when you put one of your own people in front of your boss, is what the hell are they going to say? And I've had people on my team where I've been reluctant to put them in front of senior leadership, because I'm like, I have no idea what the hell's going to come out of their mouth. I don't know if they're going to say something they're not supposed to, if they're going to give away one of my secrets, or kind of make me look right. So I think this piece of, how do you come across? How are you perceived? And can they trust that you can manage what comes out of your mouth and say the right thing? I love how you've articulated that.
And I think just to build on that in terms of, the question, which is, how do I address it? I think, I actually have taken a lot away from listening to our listeners, but as I reflect back on my career, a lot of it comes down to a couple of things, right? One is show up as you want to be received. That's something that we've heard time and time again. So, it does matter how you show up, how you dress for the occasion, how you kind of are perceived in terms of, showing up on time and showing up prepared. I think preparedness is a second thing I would say. Are you prepared for your meetings? Do you go in anticipating the questions that are going to be answered? Do you go in understanding who the audience is and then presenting in a way, not for you to get your messages across, but for them to receive the messages they need to receive in a way and allow them space to ask questions or to get in?
Yeah.
And then the third is to, be vulnerable enough to a degree to know what you know and know when you don't know something, and not come across as like a know-it-all, or not vulnerable enough to be able to say, you know what, let me take that away and come back to you, and be able to write a very succinct email up to respond. So I think there's a number of things. It's not a thing. You can't go to ChatGPT and say, tell me how to improve my executive presence.
Right.
But I think you can stand back and reflect on, how do you show up, and look around, observe your other executives, observe more senior people than you, and take what is authentic to you and make up what executive presence is to you. Don't emulate someone that is completely different from you. Emulate people who you resonate with. And I think executive presence will come.
I agree. And I think it's an interesting plug for, and I mean, nobody likes to work from home as much as I do, but it is a plug for the benefits of being in the office. Watching executives that you like and admire and respect and want to be like in whatever way, that's really hard to do when you log into a meeting, give your spiel, everybody gets off on virtually. It's really hard to get that. And I think we've heard it on an episode previously, where it's just some of the benefits of being in office. So
totally
great.
I just want to throw one other thing out. Is that the best way to develop anything, whether it's executive president's presence, the ability to kind of show up the right way, presentation skills, feedback. I know we've talked about it. Feedback, the only way you're going to develop is by asking. And if people don't give it to you naturally, just go out there and say, like, tell me what I did really well there. Tell me what you'd like to see a bit differently. It's an unlock for you in terms of how quickly one can develop when they're just asking for pointed places where they can develop.
That's right. And I think if you do ask for feedback and all you hear back is, well, you don't have executive presence, it's up to you to then poke at that and say, okay, I need you to tell me exactly what that means in this organization to you in this culture, because it is different. You can get away with things in some cultures that you can't in others, and you need to be more buttoned up in others versus other places. But I think the moral of the story is it's in you. It's not something you can buy. It's not something that you can just inherit. You have to practice it, and you have to know what it is that you're trying to do. But you can do it. All right. Good luck. Okay. Next question. This one I really liked. So I've been asked to take over a team that has nothing to do with my experience or interest, in addition to my own. How do I get out of it? What do you think, Ilana?
I love this one. It's happened to me a couple of times in my career. And more importantly, it's going to happen to everyone. Because if you think you're going to go through your career where, you're going to have every job as your dream job, or it's like right in the bullseye.
You only do things you love.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Not going to happen. I think this is a really important one, because I think the first one is we always have to start from, you're going to learn something from everywhere, whether it's from the people you're working with, whether it's the knowledge that you're getting from that area that you didn't think you needed to know or had no interest in. You are going to absolutely get something out of that job. And so I think that's first and foremost. The second thing is when you don't know things, you kind of have to own that. And you're not being put in that role, I guarantee you, because of your skill. You just said your depth of knowledge. You just said you don't know anything about that area. You're being put there because you're a great leader, because you're curious, because you have the ability to learn new things. So lean into that. It's a great way of getting into your team. It's a great way of asking questions. It's a great way of being curious as to how something else is run. And what you're going to get out of that is you're going to get a team full of people who, are really engaged with you because they feel like they have a role to play in your success. And you're going to get a whole new skill that you can put on your resume that maybe it wasn't something you wanted to do, but it's for sure, I guarantee you, something one day in the future, you're going to sit there in an interview and someone's going to say, did you ever have experience with this? And you're going to be like, oh yeah, I did. Because I took on a new team, or I took on a new skill, or I took on a new interest, or I onboarded with a team who didn't know me. All of those things come from an experience like this. So I think it's a very rich experience, and you should enter it with extreme enthusiasm and excitement.
I honestly can't even add anything to that. I think that was brilliant. I was, until you got there, was going to say, well, the answer of like how to get out of it is don't. And then exactly what you said. Never have I ever had an experience that I regret. As much as I hated it at the time, perhaps, so far, I have had the luck of being able to see the benefit of every experience that I didn't initially want. And I think we have to, that gives me enough faith to know that even if I come across an experience that I'm not enjoying and I don't know why I'm in this place and I never find out why, that just means I couldn't figure it out. It doesn't mean that it wasn't there for a reason. And so my advice, same as yours, Ilana, is don't try to get out of it. In fact, lean into it and try to get as much out of it as you can, because it will serve you in the future in a way that you can't possibly know right now. Okay, one more question for me, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Ilana. So this is also a really good question. Obviously, we only picked great questions. What's the best way to deal with a difficult coworker who constantly undermines me?
Okay, that's a great question. And it's one that you can't really learn about in an MBA class. You can't really learn about it by reading a bunch of books. It's really something that, you learn over time, and you have to really try different techniques or tactics because it's different with every person. I can't say I've never been in this position, but I can say that anytime I have been in this position, or for the most part, I've been able to overcome it by trying different things and trying different tactics. And generally, when this is happening, it's less about you and it's more about the other person and how they're feeling. And so my experience has been a couple of things. One is observing, making sure that you can observe what is happening, like on what situations, when is that happening? The other observation I like to do is observe that person. So if someone's undermining you, like what makes that person really tick? What drives them? What actually makes them feel good? What makes them feel bad? And so then when you have that information, you're able to really step back and say, okay, what am I going to do here? Is this a situation of someone who's bully, like a little bit more of a bully? And so you kind of have to hit it head on and just hit it. And that typically comes from insecurity. So you just hit it head on. Like, I'm observing this direct conversation. Can we talk about that? And let's talk about how we're going to work going forward. It's almost never failed that you can get to a better place through that type of conversation. I think talking to colleagues about tactics that you can use to go after that, but is one thing. So you're kind of practicing or role playing that advice so that if you're going to go have that conversation. And then I think a third thing is really figuring out tactics that engage them even passively on winning together. And so if someone's undermining you, the best way to not be undermined is to be a partner. And so right. I have found that like engaging people more proactively versus reactively, it's very hard for them to undermine you when they're looking in your eyes and saying, okay, are we good? Are we going to do this together? Yeah. The undermining kind of goes away because they've agreed face to face. It's not passive. So that often requires you to get from behind your computer or your screen and actually have face to face conversations so that it's real. And then, I think at the end of the day, if you can't get over it, what you do is have to change yourself or adjust yourself to accept a certain reality. And then you have to approach situations differently, knowing that the outcome, the response of that person is going to not be that great. How do you kind of put things around it such that it doesn't really impact you that much? You kind of create a mode around it. So you're kind of like, yeah, I just expect that from that person. So I'm kind of working these ways to avoid kind of really engaging in that situation.
Yeah. No, I think really great answers. I'm trying to think what I can add to that. And I think the way that I've experienced it in the past or how I would deal with it is kind of bring it out into the light. So making sure that it's not, people act differently in front of other people and usually for the better. So, if you're having conversations with somebody and they're undermining you in front of your team or their team, maybe bring some more colleagues into the room and so that there's just kind of more witnesses. Yeah. I think I love the idea of trying to partner with them because it's not about you, it's about them. And so trying to figure out what it is that they're looking for. Are they looking for more recognition? Do they feel like they're being left out? Are they worried that, this is not going to work out for them? Most of the time people are thinking about themselves. And so, whatever actions they're taking, again, it's not about you. And then the last thing I would say from my experience is nothing stays the same. Nothing is forever. And when I've had people in my past who have bothered me for whatever reason, something happens. They get promoted, you get promoted, you move on, they move on. A new boss comes in, changes the dynamics, something, strategy, COVID happens, whatever. Like, it's just like life is crazy. And so just know that it's not indefinite. And then listen, at the end of the day, you can take control of the situation and you can always leave. But, I would try all of those other things first and hope for the best. And usually the situation will resolve itself somehow. All right. So over to you, Ilana. You're the question asker now. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So I love this next one because I have a lot of empathy. I feel guilty when I need to work or travel for work. And I know I shouldn't feel guilty. My husband doesn't seem to. What can I do about this feeling in my gut?
Oh, this is such a good question, and it's so relevant. And you and I talk about this a lot, and we've talked about it with previous guests as well. Megan Anderson had a great episode where she really shed some light on this, and I've even counseled with her on this. I feel this deeply. I struggle with it a lot, and I see my husband who doesn't, and it's fascinating. I don't know that I have the answer other than the genuine belief that it's, first of all, you're not alone. A lot of women feel this way. A lot of women don't. Some men feel this way. Like, it's not necessarily a gender thing. I think women feel it more. But you're not alone. That doesn't mean that it's okay or that it's right or that it is what it is. I think you can still do things to try to improve it. I think there's this, definitely for me, this issue of quality over quantity. So I say to myself, okay, so if I'm going to be away, then I'm going to maybe spend extra time with this kid, or if I'm away in the evening, maybe I get home in time for bedtime, and we have a really special bedtime routine with my really little kids. And then I think you just have to, when you're working, really be focused on working. This was the advice that Megan gave of, like, when you're working and you're away, like, work your ass off and really give it your all. And then when you're home, be home. So I think I try to take that with me, but it is something that I am struggling with on the daily.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, my natural inclination, if I can be so bold, is to say, get over it. Because I think, and that's a very harsh thing to say. This is why
Ilana's in my life.
That's a very harsh thing to say. And listen, I have the benefit of being, of having grown children now. I mean, my youngest is 15. I have the benefit of seeing what my travel and what my working did to them, which is, I'm pretty sure, not very much on the downside and a lot on the upside, actually, in terms of they have no idea that I took a 10-day trip that I lamented over in 2008, when they were through 2 and 3. Right. And they have no recollection of the trip I took for 2 weeks with a friend in 2014. And I remember the guilt I felt getting on that plane. And then I came back and I was so much richer for it. I was buoyant, I was energized, and I was a better mom because of it. And so the reason I'm so bold is to say get over it is because I can look back and say, it didn't really impact my children or my husband at all. And I think the key thing in that question is, my husband doesn't make me feel guilty. Well, then you are lucky. If you have a partner who encourages you to go and who doesn't make you feel guilty and you still feel guilty, it is a get over it.
No, I think the question, if I understood it correctly, was that she's looking at her husband and she's like, well, he doesn't seem to feel guilty.
I thought,
I think it was just like, she doesn't feel, he's doing the exact same thing and he doesn't seem to feel guilty. So why am I?
Well, I think it's both things, right? So if you have a husband who doesn't feel guilty doing it, and you shouldn't feel guilty doing it, nor if you have a husband that encourages you not to feel guilty, you should be, you're blessed. And I happen to have been blessed.
Same.
Over the course of my career. But I really, looking back, just encourage every woman or man at any point in their career, if you're feeling guilty for taking the days you need to work or to, I mean, listen, there's an extreme to that, and I'm not talking about the extreme. Do the balance, but if you're going to commit to something, don't feel guilty, because at the end of the day, you're going to be a better person for doing what's right for you and your family than just doing what's right for your family.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, next question. I want to pivot in my career. Isn't that a timely topic? But I'm scared of starting over. Any advice?
I love this question. I love pivoting. I also I feel like it's really, we use the word pivoting very loosely. I feel like if I look at my career, that visibly, like if you just look at it on the face of it, has a lot of pivots. They weren't pivots. They were tweaks. They were minor shifts. And in retrospect, and obviously the way that I kind of look back and think about it and also present it, it was very purposeful. I mean, let's be real. In the moment, a lot of them were just like surviving, opportunistic, luck, whatever. So I'm a big fan of it. I think if you're trying to make a change, I 100% encourage you. That's when you grow. Ilana, you and I have had these conversations a lot of like those feelings, that feeling that you feel when you're new at a job and you don't know anything. That is the feeling of growth. It's the same feeling when imposter syndrome shows up and says, well, what do you think you're doing here? That's the feeling of growth. And if you don't have that, how boring, then you're just, it's Groundhog's Day and you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And so I think if you just rename the word pivoting to growth, then why wouldn't you want to do it? And why, and yes, you'll deal with the growing pains, but that's kind of the fun of it all. And then see where that gets you and the lily pad that you kind of get to be on next. And then always just think of it, nothing is forever and nothing is for certain. For good and bad, that annoying coworker is not going to stay there forever, but you don't have to stay at this job forever. And new opportunities will come. And so this idea of pivoting, I would say embrace it, do it. Life's too short. No matter how old you are, you still have a really long runway, and that's a really long time to do something you don't want to do. And so if you have the opportunity, do it. If it's not easy, just do it anyway, and you'll figure it out.
And let me build a little bit on it. So first of all, I 100% agree. I think we should rename pivoting. Whether it's a tweak or like adjustment, I actually think we should pivot on the word pivot, because I think based on how things are changing in the world, in technology, in the pace of change, I think really all of us are going to be pivoting much more, whether we're in an
whether you like it or not,
in a role, you can't avoid it. And so I think then it gets to what is the pivot you're considering? And I think to your point, and I think I loved what you said, this growth mindset and the ability to kind of identify where you want to grow. So I think it really depends on what the pivot or adjustment is. If it's just, I'm taking a new role in a company that wasn't really in my bullseye, but they've asked me to take on something new. We just talked about that, great experience. If this is, I'm in an industry and I'm being sought for a different role in a different industry and I don't know what to do, I'm not comfortable. Well, ask yourself, what's the downside to taking on a new role in a new company? If this is like I've known people in my career who I'm like, I did it very early in my career. I'm a teacher and I'm going to go into business, or I'm in business and I want to go do, I'm in a core finance role and I want to go be a life coach. These are big pivots. Yeah. And what I would say on those is just do your research and make sure that it's something that you really want to do. Because the only time I think a pivot is wrong or may not be right for you is if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And the wrong reasons for me is, you've mentioned one, running away from a colleague or a boss that you don't love. And so you run to a pivot that you think may be better, not always. Second is you're taking a job in some place that you don't know about, and you're just kind of doing it because it looks really good or the money looks really good. Do your research, make sure you've done the due diligence. And otherwise, just take some pause and identify like what are the things you're looking to do and how you're looking to feel. And then all day long, I totally agree with you, Gail. Like it's never too late to pivot. Just do it for the right reasons and make sure that you've done your homework to know. It doesn't have to work out, but to not look back and go, oh man, I wish I'd known. Because I think that would be a shame if you could have known and you didn't. But I think a pivot, we've all done them, and they're wonderfully great growth experiences. Okay, let's go on to the next one. These are all excellent questions. I'm burnt out and exhausted. Who can't empathize with that? I don't want to quit my job, but I can't take time off. What do I do?
I hear this question often from, there's a few women that I mentor, and I hear this question often. And I think the answer is, and I don't know if it's the women that I'm surrounded by, I think a lot of high-performing women are often working at 110%. And I think, obviously there are certain circumstances where you can't necessarily pull back, but my advice would generally be like, if you can give 80%, I bet you your 80 is better than most people's 100. If you're a high performing person who is, who's feeling this way, I bet they might not even notice. And so I would say, and generally speaking, I used to tell my team all the time that like, I don't want them operating at 100. That's when you get burnt out. That's when you can't, that's not sustainable. I'd love for them to be operating at 80, 90%. And then when I come to them and say, I need you to go a little more, they have it in them to give. And so I'd say like, try to pull it right back. Look at everything that you're doing, personal and professional. What are the, personal girlfriend dinners that you maybe, and I'm not suggesting you eliminate your social life, but are you going out 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week? Could you maybe go out once or twice? Are there things that you've committed to that maybe you don't really have to go, extracurriculars? And then work-wise, what if you didn't answer that email that night? Like, what is really going to happen? I say this all the time of like, okay, so if you were actually sick, like in the hospital, and you couldn't go to that meeting, couldn't answer that email, would life go on? Would they be okay? Of course they would. They would just figure it out. They'd either push the meeting out, or they'd have the meeting without you, or, life will, sadly, you're
Yes.
not that important. And so life will go on. And so you kind of have to act that way a little bit sometimes to preserve your sanity and your mental health and your well-being. Sometimes, even if you're not at death's door, you kind of have to pretend that you are and pull back just a little. Otherwise, listen, your body's going to do it for you. And it won't be up to you.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very timely because I just came back from a course a couple of months ago, or a session in a course where we talked about this exact thing, and it's this concept of burnout. And when burnout happens, it's because you're so right. It's that 110% too long with absolutely no recovery.
Yeah.
And so I think they talk about these 4 zones. And again, I'm not going to go into a whole lecture, but there's a performance zone, which is what you talked about. Like, you're at your peak and you're doing really well. And if you push it too far for too long, you end up in burnout because you haven't taken this recovery. And you can look, if you type in 4 quadrants burnout, you'll see what these zones are.
That's cool.
And I think the big thing that you talked about, I think it's implied in your 80 versus 110 is recovery has to be built into your day-to-day. And recovery comes from setting boundaries, like you talked about, taking time for yourself, clearing your brain from the, oh my God, I didn't do the email. Oh my God, I didn't take the meeting. Oh my God, I went out for dinner with my husband and I didn't look at my phone for 2 hours. That's where recovery comes from. And whatever recovery is for you. For me, recovery typically comes from me taking a vacation for 4 or 5 days, or going to sit at a hotel for 2 days by myself, just reading books and quiet. Other people, recovery is I work out every morning for an hour, and that's my recovery zone. And if I give it up, my mental clarity is not there. It doesn't matter what recovery is for you, but if you don't build in sleep, like sleep. Some people need 9 hours of sleep a night or 8 hours of sleep a night to recover. Whatever that is, you gotta build that in, and it's got to be part of your workday. Yeah. Because if you don't build it in and you don't set boundaries, that burnout is going to just sit there, and that's on you. That's not on your boss. Yep. That's not on your company. That's not on your husband. That's not on your partner. It's not on your kids. It's you. You got to set the boundaries. You
just triggered something for me that I love that you said that, because I always say, most companies are never going to tell you to just stop working. They're going to take whatever you're willing to give. And it's absolutely on you. And I've said that so many times of like work-life balance. The only person in charge of work-life balance is you. You have to, now whether you're at the right place or not, that it matches your idea of work-life balance, but it is absolutely on you to say, I will not answer emails on the weekend, or, sit and work on the weekend. I will not, text with my boss at 10 o'clock at night, or whatever. It's up to you to define what those limits are.
And I want to be clear, like to be fair to companies and to bosses, like they're like,
that's their job.
That's their job. Like, it's not, I don't mean it to imply it's like a negative. No. Like that's what it is. Like, it is what it is. And if you get a great boss who is really concerned about your work-life balance, like, eat that up all day long. But like, know that if you don't actually establish that for yourself, it doesn't matter who your boss is. you're just never going to take it. So I think it's a really important lesson. I encourage people to look that up and really assess for themselves, like the recovery thing, because whoever asked that question, it's a question that I've gotten asked. If I've gotten it once, it's been like thousands of times in my career.
Right.
How do I avoid burnout? You got to build it in.
Great.
Well, this was great. That was 6
This is fun.
Really meaty questions. It makes me think we should do this more often, because I think we have a backlog of them.
Yeah.
But we're so thrilled to have done this. And Gail, always fun to riff with you on these our life.
It's like a wrap up. It's like a whole wrap-up episode.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And if you don't know, at the end of every episode, we do a back and forth like this and kind of share our perspective of the episode and what we learned and what we took away. And so if you listen to the music and think that we're done, we're not done. There's more.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I found myself truly thinking back to like the guests we've had, drawing on their lessons that they've shared with us that I could kind of put together for this Q&A episode. So
there's some juicy ones.
Thanks for sending in your questions. Keep engaging with us, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you, and give us your feedback. Let us know how you thought this episode went, and if you liked it, we'll do it again. Thanks, Ilana. This was fun.
Thanks, Gail.
Thanks for listening to this episode of She Means Business. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and head over to our show notes where you can find helpful links and summaries of key points from the episode. We'd also love to hear from you on LinkedIn or Instagram, so please follow and DM us at the She Means Business podcast. See you next time.